Okay, hello everyone. Hi, and thank you for having me here. And so we're just going to briefly talk about the disparities within breastfeeding, and the aim is for us to look at the barriers, find out ways how we can break them, and uplift education to also help make changes and to go forward. Okay, so I'll just start. So just to break the ice, I'm going to ask you all a question, and you can respond if you feel, and don't feel threatened if you feel you might get it wrong. No one could get it wrong. You're just learning. We're all learning. So the question is, do you know why we need to highlight breastfeeding in the Black community? Or do you think you know why? Have you ever thought about it? Okay. So what made, whoever said yes, what made you think about it?
It's very underrepresented everywhere, languages, social media, and I think that the women Black origin have a higher problems associated with birth and breastfeeding.
Yeah, you're right. And anyone else? Would you?
There's just, well, as we saw earlier in Emma's talk, there's very little. You know, as someone who's been supporting breastfeeding for many years, you just don't see what the different breastfeeding problems look like on different skin tones. And I support I'm in a very ethnically diverse area myself, and it can be very hard to tell whether someone has thrush if they have a very dark skin tone if you don't know what you're looking for.
You're right. Yeah, that's right. Anyone else would like to speak on that? So if you want to go ahead.
Kind of trying to understand cultural differences, how you communicate with different, someone's from a different background, or how you communicate with them about breastfeeding might need to be different.
Yeah. Would you say why it needs to be different?
Why it can be different, or why it can be. Say if you're working with somebody who's hasn't been living in Britain for very long, maybe, and their cultural understanding of breastfeeding could be different to yours, or how you communicate with them might be different or strange, or awkward. Just trying to understand it from their perspective, really.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know in the States that obstetricians will tell Black women antenatally that they will not be able to breastfeed.
Yeah. So there's a lot around it, and there's no wrong or right of what's going on in regards to that. We all need to gain that education, not just only in regards to as practitioners, but also as mothers. If we're not learning as much about breastfeeding antenatally, or just within daily life, as a daily life skill, just as children, just seeing it and learning about it, then we're already making barriers and putting blocks against us. So, as you said, in the Black community, that in the doctors in America, they tell Black mums that they won't be able to breastfeed. And then also, someone said there's not any imagery, so Black people don't see themselves breastfeeding. So then if you don't see yourself doing something, then you'll never put yourself in that shoes. And also, I don't know if anyone mentioned in regards to the practitioners, there's not many Black breastfeeding practitioners either. So when they're looking for someone, they're not going to find anyone that they can so much relate to on a deeper level to say that, oh, you're working within breastfeeding. What is this about? Can I learn some more? They just see it as, they would predominantly look at it as though this is someone of a white culture thing to do, and it's not so much within the Black community. And so there's a lot of history that goes behind this. Like, in general, like within the national health services that we experience, there's basically different experiences between different groups of women, and some differences in the way of timing with which care was assessed were evident for women in the black and the minority and ethnic background. And there was also a difference in the way that care was experienced by these women, with poorer staff communication and the feelings of not being treated or respected. And there's a lot of things around this. Some of it is to do with the history of what's been going on with black people in general, of being put down as the lower class. And also there's a history of the social media portraying black people as to be bad, rude, abrupt and horrible. So if a practitioner is going to have a vision of a black person that way, it's going to be very difficult. It's already caused a barrier because they're going to feel intimidated to then go and approach a black mother. And so what tends to happen is that sometimes it comes very tick box, that they do what they have to do and what's necessary to do when they're in the NHS services, and they don't maybe engage as much to see what's going on around breastfeeding. And who knows how long would you say it is for you to recognize, it will take for you to recognize a mother is breastfeeding her baby well? Can you give me an estimate of how long, if you were to visit a mother, if you're in the hospital, if you approach the mother, how would you know if a mother's breastfeeding well? Pardon? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, so that can actually take quite some time, isn't it? We all know that the NHS is generally rushed, so they have very small amount of time anyway. But then if you also got the social barrier in regards to, I don't know how to communicate to this woman, or I don't want to go there and feel at threat or anything like that, and you've got all this stigma put back in your head that you've not built up, but society has also helped build up a picture in your brain. So every time you do see that colour, you feel this fear, in some shape or form. You tend to just do what you have to do, what your job allows you to do, and you don't ask the open questions that you're supposed to ask as a practitioner. And because for one, you're rushed with time, and for two, you don't want to get into a conversation that may lead to something that you're not comfortable with. And also, if you don't know what you're looking out for, within the regards to if mum says, like, you don't know if her breast is sore or not, then there's another barrier that is there, like psychologically in the back of your mind. You've got all these barriers and you've not seen it. But so what's happening, there's so many different barriers that is preventing practitioners to then liaise and have this open conversation with mothers. And there's also a history with a lot within the black community of mothers not so much calling out for support and help. And so we're gonna go back to this slide just a moment. So they said there was a similar findings occurred with the focus of what was on the experience of black minority ethnic women born outside the UK. So it wasn't only the mums that was born in the UK that was having these barriers, it was also the same with mums that was born outside the UK and come in. So they may be having as English as their second language, and so they've already got that barrier that's there. And you know, not much of us is actually reaching out and saying, you know, let's get an advocate in place. You just sort of do what you have to do. Mum is alive, she's well, you know, as long as mum is got some feeding going on, we don't know if it's going well, then she can be discharged. Majority of mums start at the hospital, and this is sometimes how the treatment ends up being. Like they need to discharge quite quickly, which is quite unfortunate, but then the mums get pushed out into the community. Not all the time are they actually knowledgeable, and it's been liaised to them in detail of where the services for breastfeeding is beyond that. Okay, so it says single women, those who had left education at 16 years or earlier, women living in the most deprived areas, and black minority ethnic women were all less likely to have seen a health professional by 12 weeks about their pregnancy care, or to be aware of all the options for where they could give birth. So this is just about general maternity care. It's not based on breastfeeding, but if their general maternity care is not really so good and not how it should be, and as is not basically delivered equally, then imagine how it is going to be for breastfeeding. Because we all know that within the maternity care, breastfeeding support is very small within the NHS. And if they're failing with just general maternity care, imagine how deeper the level is of breastfeeding care. They could be failing. Okay, and that's not, they're generally, many women, most women, all women, lots of women are being failed, but the black community are being failed even more. So let me just move on. Does anyone have any idea what this imagery here is about? Does anyone know what was happening with wet nursing? Slavery. So it wasn't a choice? So
I was going to say too, black women were breastfeeding the white babies, and if they had babies, their babies were taken, so they were then just lactating for the other baby, not their own.
Yeah, that's right. So what was happening is that they were being enslaved. They was also so they would have to wet nurse for white mothers, and their babies were left. And sometimes they may be able to give them a small amount of milk. They wasn't allowed to share the breast, and sometimes their babies were left completely to be supplemented with whatever they can find to supplement their babies with. If they died, they died. Sometimes they'll have to move out really far, sometimes across the waters, to also work as be enslaved or work as a wet nurse. And therefore they broke that bond with their babies from very early. And what happened as well, there was also a time when they would monitor the mothers and to make sure that the mothers are breastfeeding, but they would also control it in a way that the mothers then can make more babies for the fields as well, and to work. And then they would also then stop them from breeding, so they can then also have them work, the mothers work for them. So there was some kind of control in regards to when they wet nurse and when they don't wet nurse in regards to contraception, but it wasn't in regards to the black mother's interest. It was more for the white women that was using these mothers to feed their babies. So there's a history in regards to, so in other words, these mums, a lot of black mothers in regards to the older generation, they have a lot of trauma that's been trickling down in regards to breastfeeding. So some of us, like around my age group, or even a lot of us in here, won't know that they've had this history of trauma. Not just only white women won't know, but there's many of black women that don't know that there actually is trauma that's trickled down. So when their mothers said to them, oh, you know, you can only breastfeed for a couple of weeks and then you need to start offering something else because your breast milk won't be enough. All of these little sayings here and there was little spreaded around, and it was spread around a little bit, a bit like Chinese whispers, and then no one really knows the core of where it's come from. But a lot of it has come from trauma from the great-grandparents that's had to flee and leave their babies and not breastfeed their babies, and also had to then learn how to supplement. So then when they thought of breastfeeding, some of these mums thought of breastfeeding as a negative thing because they went through negative trauma in regards to having to breastfeed someone else's baby, having to part from their baby as well, and seeing their baby undernourished while the baby that they're wet nursing for is voluptuous and striving very well. So there's a lot of trauma that goes behind that. So these are some of the images here, you can see. And you can see there's one that's right there with the mother's looking at her baby and she's not able to feed her baby. So yes, you can see that there. It says black mothers was forced to dedicate the majority of their milk to white children rather than their own children. So when black mothers are becoming pregnant, some are quiet about this. They're not sure in regards to how they're going to go into the system. Reason why is because there's also a history of stereotyping black women, black families, black men in general. So they feel that when they go into the system, they're going to get asked lots of questions that is irrelevant. And they're also going to have, they're going to be made to feel a certain way, less than. And when they have that feeling of less than, it's already psychologically building up some form of stress and anxiety. And don't get me wrong, everyone, especially if you plan for a baby, most of us are happy for the pregnancy. But it's when you've got to then liaise with healthcare professionals that are educated, and if they're not educated on their level, and sometimes even if they are educated, they are actually still having to sometimes find it difficult in regards to liaising with the system, in regards to actually being listened to and respected, and also be given choices. So, who knows about the infant mortality rates? The infant mortality rates are quite high within the black community, and the research shows that it's nearly 5-fold risk of unexplained deaths in infancy, and between ethnic groups in England and UK, in Wales, sorry. So, if antenatal breastfeeding support or education was given, I think that this number could be reduced significantly, because a lot of these mums would have been aware of the benefits for themselves, the benefits for their babies, also been aware of what support is out there, and start liaising with practitioners from before they've had their babies, preparing themselves. You know, in the black community, it's actually more likely for mothers to give birth pretermly. So they're more likely to have preterm babies, which are small and more likely to be unwell, and which also heightens the risk of infant mortality. So if these mums were educated about breastfeeding, they could maybe even start to express antenatally and have something to start their baby off with, and then they can continue and start breastfeeding or get breastfeeding support. But it's all about having a network, building a community, and building a village. We don't have that anymore. All of us really don't have it much anymore. But it's in regards to us as, is everyone practitioners here, or we've got some mums here? Sorry. You're a mum. That's good. Well, it's good for mothers to talk as well. So, and the more you learn, the more you can share and know what you're doing is amazing. Okay, so in regards to us as practitioners, then if we share all this information, we can be setting up that person to actually strive from early, to help their babies from early, and because they would have had that knowledge, instead of just asking the questions, doing a tick box, are you breastfeeding or you're not breastfeeding, and then ticking the box, mum chooses not to breastfeed or mum chooses to breastfeed. We need a bit more than that. I know sometimes we are rushed for time, but then sometimes it could just be like, you can contact this number and find out more, or this website, look up this website, it's amazing with breastfeeding stuff. If you ever choose to breastfeed, or if you look at the benefits, you'll be blown by it. It's just a bit of enthusiasm, and that would enlighten someone to then maybe take a look. And you know, when you are cut with time, sometimes just sharing a word of someone's name, someone's website, or contact number can actually go a long way. Okay, so that's in regards to antenatal. Who else here actually thinks about, what do you think about antenatal breastfeeding support? It's essential. Yeah, I believe so. Does anyone here actually give antenatal support and breastfeeding education? Yeah?
But I find it a real struggle to get parents engaged at that stage. Like, I think people think, oh, I'll just show up at the hospital and I'll just get some support there.
Much easier second time when it didn't work well the first time, and they're really keen. But it should be, we can go back to what Ellen was saying, it should be in schools.
Yeah.
It definitely should. It definitely should. And yeah, I would say it should be in schools, it should be in nurseries, and we shouldn't hide and breastfeed. I know that society has sort of made it so difficult for us to breastfeed in public and to feel confident doing it. But the more that we're doing it, we need to embrace one another and actually be like, you know, well done. Like, you know, make that mum feel happy and proud that she's actually breastfeeding, you know, and breastfeeding in public. Actually, anything that happens, people like to follow trends. So once they see someone else doing something, they're like, oh, I might give that a go. And then it gets quite contagious. So whoever is breastfeeding in public, like really like embrace it, and it would have a knock-on effect, a positive one, not just for them, not for just that parent, but it goes on and it actually helps our health, our whole health service, all in all. So with the infant mortality, the risk is lowest for Indian, Bangladesh, Pakistani, white non-British and black African babies. Intermediate for white British, and highest for mixed black African white, mixed black Caribbean white, and black Caribbean. So that's the risk of the infant mortality and who's the levels. So I'm sure we all know here, if you're all working around birth, if you're working around breastfeeding, then we all have an idea of the benefits of breastfeeding and the reductions on SIDS, right? And breastfeeding for the last 2 months can actually reduce the risk of SIDS by 50%, which is a huge amount. And if mums are unaware of this, I don't know if they're getting this information, but if mums are unaware of this, then they ain't going to actually make the step so much, especially if they know that their babies are dying at a high rate. They're more likely to then consider breastfeeding because of it is there, statistics don't lie, and it's happening. So breastfeeding will definitely help. And the longer a mother breastfeeds, the more protection it will give their baby. So within the black community, women tend to generally breastfeed like very short amount of time. There's lots of reasons behind it. It could be trauma, it's sometimes family influences and pressure, and also sometimes that they don't have the support. And most of them would actually cut off breastfeeding from around 6 weeks. A lot of them would be like 6 weeks is like ideal, or some will say 6 months because of it says, you know, you exclusively breastfeed up until 6 months, and most of them would mix feed, but then when they start at 6 months, they would want to cut off breastfeeding altogether, and they don't know the benefits beyond that. I've also heard a mother, a black mother, say that was pregnant at the time, and she was like, yeah, I breastfed, and she felt proud, and I was like, well done, that's really good. And she goes, oh yeah, so I said, how long are you going to breastfeed this one for? And she goes, oh, I'm going to breastfeed her or him for 6 months. And I was like, oh, that's really good, but have you ever considered going on longer? You know, it's recommended to breastfeed up until 2 years or beyond if you can, but you just start to introduce solid foods. And she says, ugh, that's child molestation. She was like, that's abuse. And I was like, no, it's not, but it's just the perception of how people see things. And if they're not educated behind it, that's how they will continue. And what she said, she's got a teenager daughter as well. She's most probably made her daughter feel that way about breastfeeding too. And it has a knock-on effect because of it's most probably not just with her that sticks with, it's most probably sat within her family as well. So to look at breastfeeding like that, and like depending who she's speaking to, if they don't know about breastfeeding, they're just going to believe like, oh yeah, 6 months, like that's good because that's what they want us to do. But they're not listening to everything. They're just saying, you know, they're just hearing breastfeed up until 6 months, and then they're just like, if I could try and do that. So our breasts are very sexualized in regards to a way that people feel that it's wrong to have them out, and especially like at dinner, you're not supposed to have your breast out, you're supposed to hide and feed because they think you're doing something that is not something you should socialize and do. But then everyone else is actually socializing. I know you guys are all, I was expected to have some mums here, but so some things you'll be like, all right, Ruth, I know about this. But so I'm just going to continue as I planned. So Yeah, so with breastfeeding, in regards to breastfeeding out in public, breastfeeding out at dinners, some mums are just like, you know, they will do it. Some mums don't want to do it because of they're made to feel shamed by doing it, and to made to feel that it's something that is wrong to do. And you know, you hear stories about mums going into dirty toilets and feeding their babies. But what tends to happen a lot within the black community is that these mums will supplement their babies when they're out and then breastfeed when they're home, and they don't realise what they're doing. They're jeopardising their relationship of breastfeeding from early. So a lot of the time is that the mums, then milk starts to dry up, and they just then to give up early, because they're just like, well, the baby ain't feeding, it's crying at the breast, always hungry, so I just having to, they end up replacing it with more and more formula, and then they fall off the relationship of breastfeeding. And as with the stereotype again, but it is there, is that if they already sometimes feel uncomfortable in certain places, they are made to feel uncomfortable in certain places, breastfeeding is going to make it a lot more difficult. So that's the way that they're dealing with things. So that's why it has to be a knock-on effect throughout all communities. The more breastfeeding is seen, the more other mothers will do it. And the more that we have imagery of black mums doing it, the more they will feel confident to do it. So this was one of my clients, and so if you just have a look here, so after emergency cesarean birth, baby went into special care for observation due to a meconium complication. Okay. So what infant feeding options do you think that the mother had? Did she have no option? Did the healthcare professional, was it the healthcare professional's decisions only? Was mother able to choose how she fed her baby? Or would mother be given advice and support to breastfeed? Because she should be. Okay. So I'll let you know. So as I was with the mother after birth, because I stayed there as a doula, you're there from the beginning all the way to the end. And but now she's on the ward and come out of theatres, baby's away from her, so you know anxiety is going to be very high. As much as she's smiling, her anxiety levels are going to be at the highest. It's her first time baby as well. And so my thing is, if you're away from baby, you start hand expressing. So that was my thing. So we got a syringe. We can't express into a bottle, and all of you know why. The reason why is because you're only going to have tiny drops and you're not going to get it out that bottle. So we go to a tiny syringe, a small 1 ml syringe to start with, and then she'll build up as her colostrum builds up. So I managed to then go and get this, because when we asked, they was like really fluffing around, doing other stuff. No one was really paying her any attention. As far as they're concerned, she's come over, she's had her observations done. That's really all they need to do, and keep moving on with their rotations of work to do. So I managed to get someone to get me some syringes, and then I explained how she can hand express, and we managed to get some colostrum. So then her midwife, at some point I needed to leave because of it's been a long time. I also sat down and waited for her to come over recovery. And so as I've handed over, like, to let them know I'm going now, but I also said, like, mum tried to hand express. So she was like, oh, well, she wouldn't be expected to hand express because of they would just feed baby over there however they want to feed baby. And so I was like, is it? I was like, well, yeah, it was like, really? So, and she said that to me, so I thought they should know this, like, that this is what they do. And but with all the rush of things, and it's really hard with them, you know, the need, once they're in special care, they like to see numbers, they want to see the volume of the milk. So sometimes they really try to push for mum to give them formula. So I was just like, well, mum actually wants to breastfeed and she's happy to express colostrum, but I'm just letting you know that she might need some assistance. I've demonstrated to her, but after her giving birth, you're exhausted, so sometimes you may need someone to help you. Her partner was there helping, but he was a bit all over the place himself because he also had to go back and forth from special care as expected. They don't really want to leave baby on her own. So I then explained everything. I just said to her, you know, if it gets that serious, ask to speak to someone more senior than her or another midwife until you be able to get in a better position of letting them know what you want. And so at that time she was like, you know, Ruth, really just go. And so I did leave, and she then said to me, Ruth, it's really bad. She goes, Ruth, it's really bad. Why would they just walk past me and just go and help another lady, like a white lady that didn't even ask for help? She just went over there and just checking on her and stuff like that. And then I was there asking for help to express. Also, I was asking if someone can eventually bring me over, wanting to ask questions of when can I go over to see my baby, when can I get some help with expressing. And she said that they were just telling me, oh, they're going to have to feed baby however they want. So she had to then get her partner to go over to special care and say, you know, they want to give baby some of the expressed colostrum. And so she said that it was like a fight in there, and she couldn't really wait to get out of there. But at the same time, they was making her feel guilty, making her feel that she's doing something wrong, making her feel that she didn't really have a choice of how she wants to feed her baby or how she needs to feed her baby. And with all of the circumstances of baby being unwell, we all know that the best milk to give her, that baby, would have been breast milk. And if they couldn't give that, then the next thing, if we can get the donor milk before you offer formula. And so that was that scenario. So this was some research that was conducted within the Baby Café setting. And it says, while the samples is diverse in terms of ethnic first language and place of birth, it is biased towards older mothers and towards higher level of education and employment. Such groups are more likely to initiate breastfeeding, more likely to seek out support for breastfeeding difficulties, and more likely to be willing to be involved in research interviews. So this is what they would say, you know, many you'll find when you go to these breastfeeding cafes, there's many middle class white women there. You don't really see anyone else or any black women or Asians, or so with this, it's already has a blockage in regards to, if there's only one type of people there, then how am I going to fit in? And we've also had feedback from other mothers that has actually gone into, like, other mothers that may be middle class as well, but they're black, maybe well educated, but they're black. So they've gone into that surrounding, and the reason why is because of most of us middle class, and not just middle class, may I say, most of us that are older, middle age and educated, we have read so much about what's going on with our bodies, what's going on with our babies. We've worked most probably quite hard to have our babies when we're middle age as well, and when we're older mothers. So we're a lot more knowledgeable. So you do get black mothers that are also a lot more knowledgeable at that age, and they want to then come and get that information and also be around that, because that's what they want better. They want to be able to strive and help breastfeed their babies. But when they've gone there, they've been made to feel that they're not there. Like, you will never have a black practitioner that is actually leading these groups. And when you go into these groups, they're more likely to be the one black mother that's there. So if they're the minute person that's there, they're actually sometimes not feeling uncomfortable straight away, because some of us are used to being in that environment. But when they go there and they're made to feel uncomfortable, especially at quite a vulnerable time, no one really goes to a breast cafe to celebrate their victories within breastfeeding. Most of the time they go in because they need actual support, like from someone to be actually reassured. And if they're going into an environment that is not actually giving them that, then what do they then do? Where do they go? So it just sort of like puts a blockage if you're going to have that surrounding. So we just need to, that's just in regards to me saying this, it's not just saying this is what's there and this is how it is. It's just thinking about ways of how we can actually make a change to that. So there may be, in regards to, as we said, I'm going to keep talking about it, it's imagery, is within our advertisements, on our marketing material, just having a diverse range of people. And also in regards to maybe doing different type of days, maybe having a cultural day where everyone brings something from their culture, because even though you all, or not all of us, but some of us may be classed as white middle class women, some of us still come from different parts of the world. So we also can incorporate a cultural day, and then you can say from different places of the world, everyone brings a dish or wear something from your country, or we're going to actually make something from a different country. And this is how you can then bring a diverse community, because it's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to be a thing where all of a sudden we've got 1,000 of black practitioners that can actually help these women. So we've got to see what we can do within our work to just be more diverse, especially if you're working in a diverse area, because sometimes you could be working in a diverse area but you still don't get a diverse group of mums that comes in to see you. Okay, so let me check the time. Time's ticking, isn't it? So this is a picture here, some traditional wear. Okay, so research shows black mothers outside of London higher initiation of breastfeeding by 1.3%, but it is also very common for black mothers to introduce their babies to alternatives from early days, weeks and months due to cultural influences, social pressures and lack of skilled breastfeeding support, which I mentioned. So there are actually some practitioners that be like, actually, you guys have got the highest rates of breastfeeding, so what are you on about? Yeah, but what it is that it's the initiation. Yeah, we all want to try and give our baby the breast when we're in the hospital, and if we can. So a lot of the time, that's what is getting recorded. But when we get home, and then we fall into breastfeeding problems, as you do as breastfeeding progress, and sometimes it can happen in the first few weeks, or early days, few weeks, even the next month or so, then you can fall into breastfeeding problems. And if that happens and you don't feel that you've got anywhere to go, then, you know, a lot of women are actually, you know, well, I'm not going to have a screaming baby. You've got formula there. Why not get it? Also, sometimes it's like in the black community, you're made to like you're actually in a poorer community as black people in general, and so the majority, there is a lot of poverty within the black community, and it's pushed out there. So where it's pushed out there and it's displayed as the community on the whole, you don't want to be seen as, I can't afford to get formula. So a lot of them will be like, why am I struggling? I'm getting formula. Because, yeah, they can afford it, but they're going to think, no, I'm only going to struggle if I don't have the money. So they're not thinking about the benefits, the health issues or anything like that. They're just thinking about, you know, well, if you've got money, you can buy formula. But if they don't know about all the healthy benefits of breastfeeding, then who is going to struggle? It's horrible when you're actually going through breastfeeding and you've got cracked nipples, and some of them will say, my nipples feel like they're going to fall off. Every time I'm going to put the baby to the breast, I feel like I want to cry. I feel like it's awful. And then if they're going to, who's going to want to go through that experience knowing that you just need to go next door? But if you know the education behind it, then you'll seek information, you'll seek support elsewhere. If you know about it, then you can't help yourself without the tools, basically. Okay. So what is missing here? I'm sure you all know. So it's quite obvious. So this is how majority of the groups look, and as mothers have said, they've gone into the groups, and then like they've gone in there, they might have been there for a couple of weeks, and you know, everyone's got their friends, and you know, you try to interact, you get a bit of small talk, you're just happy for the small talk. Like at the end of the day, sometimes you come to these groups, you just know that you're just there for that time, your babies might play, and then you're going to go back home. So some people build up good relationships, some people don't. But it's not nice when a new white mother comes into that group and she's been greeted in a way that she's been there all the time. You would have thought that she's been there before the black mother, and this is what's happened. And when that's happened, it's only pushed that black mother that was trying, it's now pushed her out, because she's just thought they just obviously have some form of barrier against her. And sometimes it's just because of you maybe have something that you relate more with and you can understand more. But when you actually feel that and you experience that, and like that just goes to show you sometimes we're not thinking about it, it just naturally happens. And if that happens in areas like this and drop-in groups, and also the practitioners not really helpful within that and trying to help you feel included, then you can see what's also happening in the hospitals as well. Okay. So what would you look at that and see? What would you describe that as? Okay, so this is sore nipples, like cracked, really sore nipples, and you can't really tell, can you? No. So on this one here, oh, I don't know if it doesn't point. It doesn't point. Okay, so the one on the left-hand side, you can see it's just slightly red on the tip, but it was literally bleeding. This one was also cracked and bleeding, and if you look around the edges, what happens, it starts to scab. So when it's scabbing, depending on how close you're looking, then you may not be able to see it. So with black mothers, you can't just look at their breasts and just say, oh, your breasts are fine and healthy. You actually have to ask them. You have to have that open dialogue with them and engage to get that information, ask them how they're feeling. And what would happen over time, depending on how many black women or women of color that you are looking after, then you'll start to notice that this is how the breast looks when she says that it feels like this. But if you're not asking those questions, you'll never get to learn it. It's very hard to get these photos as well. So it is going to be hard to make a big change within our illustrations and within our books. But it's slowly happening. It's slowly happening. And yeah, we just got to try and embrace that. So that's what we saw. That's what's there. She was in lots of pain. So hold on, let me just go back to that. So she was in a lot of pain. This was also one of my clients. She was in a lot of pain. No one helped her or supported her. Midwives came out to see her at home. Didn't do any breastfeeding support with her. So when I came, she was like saying she was ready to give up. Her toes was like, you know, when you're really you're squeezing your toes, she couldn't like really breastfeed. So when I came in, then we was able to establish a good latch. And she was like, how did that happen? Like, because they're still sore, but how did you get the pain to just go? So sometimes it's just, you know, really asking, you know, if you work within breastfeeding, you know, it's just sometimes it's a few questions. You definitely need to observe what's going on, and it could just be, you know, just lift baby hair, bring baby in a bit more, and you just really, but you need to have an assessment. You have to look. If you're not looking or asking questions, then we're not going to know what's going on. And sometimes mums will just say, because a lot of mums actually believe it's okay to be sore, so they will be like, oh, it's all right, yeah, she's feeding, and they will just get on with it until it becomes unbearable. So this is some of the things that black mothers, so I said black mothers talk, what black mothers have said. So she put, I always knew I was going to breastfeed. What I didn't know was how I would feel doing it out and about as a black mother. So then she's already got a built up anxiety about breastfeeding. She's not sure how she would do it out and about. So that's a fear that she's then got to somehow break. Is she getting the support to break that fear? Who's around her to help her break that fear? On day to day, life lacks women who look like me and breastfeeding. So if you don't see women that look like you breastfeeding, as we spoke about, you're very less likely to do it. So I will try and embrace more black women as well to get out there and breastfeed in public, because of as we said, it's got a knock-on effect. And also imagery is very important. You might not have a black client, but if you can gain some imagery somehow and use it, then that can make a change in regards to what's happening with these mums and these babies. And accessing support can be challenging, was another thing that a black mother said. And it shouldn't be. Why is it challenging? It shouldn't really be challenging. It's there, the support is there, there's so many websites, there's free contact numbers that we can call. And but if we're not to know about it, then it will be challenging. I found that none of the mums who attended the breastfeeding group were black. The support workers were never black. So that's another cultural barrier. Don't get me wrong, we're not in a black orientated country, but at the same time, there is a lot of black people, especially within London, and these are from London. So what's happening? So if we're not having the education about it, also sometimes even, I don't know what positions you are in, but like if you're in the NHS, and you see that maybe there is someone that's taken quite a good keen to breastfeeding, and then is trying to make sure that the groups that are supporting the breastfeeding are diverse. We're trying to get diversity everywhere. But if it's not diverse, then sometimes you're creating more barriers there again. So that's if we have any managers within the NHS in here. And so what I'm doing, I'm trying to really break the breastfeeding barriers and uplift education. And the barriers we spoke about, and the education is not just education only for mums. Yes, it'd be great to have lots of mums, more breastfeeding, the better. But we also want to break the barriers in regards to the practitioners. So we want to have more practitioners of colour as well, teaching and supporting breastfeeding to help there be diversity within the breastfeeding world altogether, because there's a lot of word about the breastfeeding world is very white. Also in regards to the UK groups on social media, they are also very white, and sometimes black women can feel excluded, even me. So like when I first came onto social media, I felt quite excluded. I felt that I was getting bullied whenever I mentioned something. So I took myself out of some of the groups, and I then created my own group, which was a breastfeeding group for women with children of colour. So they can feel included, they can feel that they can speak about anything, they can feel happy to share their post if they wanted to. And that's quite bad. I'm used to being around amongst everybody and white women and getting on with it, but then if I'm going to be on social media and made to feel little, and you always have those little, what do they call them, trolls on there that would just like have lots to say on social media. Like, don't get me wrong, I do believe that everyone, like not everyone have their sanity brain, and some people do have mental health issues, but sometimes they do use social media as a platform to be rude and arrogant. But then it's like, if you see that as a pattern that's happening, then why would I keep myself within that space, like a space that's going to cause some anxiety or any kind of form of stress? I don't think no one should do that, and I think if anyone feels that kind of way, then to remove yourself from it. Only thing is, sometimes it can be blocking a lot of other people from getting a good amount of education which they could be receiving within these areas as well. So sometimes it's maybe, I don't know how that would change, but if we're not having black practitioners, we're not having much black breastfeeding mothers, then it's just going to remain the same, isn't it? So it's imagery as well, and what we're putting out there, and just sort of like being a little bit careful of how we word things as well. And so what I've done, I put together a Just Giving crowdfunding, which I'm going to then change over. I'm thinking if it's going to be to like a charity, but so far as I started Black Breastfeeding Week over here in the UK last year was the launch of it, and so this year was the second year of it. And what I wanted to do is raise funds. So I know that a lot of people would say as well that there's actually sometimes it's the money that is maybe preventing Black women to come in and getting support from like lactation consultants as well. And also me as a practitioner, I don't have my Black clientele is lower than it is as what I get more white women that come to me than I get Black women. And so some of this could be to do with money and also with education, because if they're not educated about the benefits of something, they're less likely to spend their money in it. And if they was educated, they would. So it's like, so I'm trying to break the barriers. So what I've done is I've started to raise, set this up. So far, I've raised £273, and the aim is to raise money so I can then help these women to access breastfeeding, really heavily subsidized breastfeeding. The reason why I say subsidized and not completely free is because of sometimes a mother might take advantage and be like, oh, I'm going to call, can you just help me out with a lactation consultant? And if they don't pay nothing, like even £5, then sometimes they may make that lactation consultant come out to them and then not be there or not be available for them. And then that's a waste of their time. So it will either be heavily subsidized, whereas it's like really, really low. And I may even think, I haven't completed everything as yet because I'm still trying to raise the funds, but I'm thinking that maybe depending on how their funds are, which is something that I will discuss with each client, then maybe they would get the refund after they've had the support of what they contributed, their donation they contributed. So they do get free access. So it's just breaking that barriers to them, so then they can say that they can afford it. Because to be honest, the NHS they're in there a very small amount of time, and the support is beyond that. We need it from further beyond that. And also in regards to the education. So I had a Black someone that's working within birth, or someone that wanted to be a breastfeeding supporter, breastfeeding counsellor, or even go on to be a lactation consultant, then it can be funded for them to gain that education. So a lot of the courses for breastfeeding are a bit pricey, and like within regards to you can go to college and get free education, it's very unlikely you can go to college and learn how to teach breastfeeding. I don't know if they've started to put that in college as a free courses yet, but it's not that I know of. A lot of it is either it's out of the system and you have to search for it. It's not within our reach so much unless you're told about it. If you're not told about it, you won't know. So it's just really trying to get these mums to actually not only be mums that breastfeed, but also to bring diversity within the breastfeeding practitioners. So that's what the raising of the funds are for. You can see there's the website, then you can read a little bit more about it and share it amongst your peers. So yeah, so that's it. So I would like to, any questions?
So I came to the Black Breastfeeding Week a couple weeks ago, and it was nice to have chats and that sort of thing. What sorts of practical things can we do as those who are doing breastfeeding support, whether it's in a cafe sort of a style or a group sort of a thing? I think it would feel weird if, this woman comes over to you and starts chatting to you and doesn't chat to anybody else because, you're one black breastfeeding person in the room, so you don't want to single a person out. Yeah. But, what sorts of things can we do? Because we are a pretty white
profession.
Breastfeeding supporters are quite, the majority of them are. And, so what can we do to help incorporate others?
Things like maybe having you can have it that maybe your background music is mixed So from a mixed culture, you can have days where you have cultural days, as I mentioned, or you can maybe say you're having create it as an event maybe and bring in someone of a different, it could either be a different profession, like maybe someone that's coming to interact with you guys to do something, but from a Black origin. So if it was that you was going to have, who can I think of? Say a comedian, a Black comedian to come in, maybe they like for a short period of time. You can ask for contributions for it as well, but something that's obviously not, that maybe as well is not too pricey. Or if you was to get maybe a Caribbean chef that's gonna come in and teach you guys how to make something that's meant to be really nutritious, so you guys are doing more than breastfeeding, and it's just like having the odd occasions of doing these little cultural things and bringing someone, like, because of, as you said, like if you're all very white and then it's just that one Black person, then if you're going to bring another Black person or a Black orientated day, that then you would attract Black people to it. They'll be like, oh, did you, like if you've got posters out and you're like, oh, did you hear they're having a cultural day today? Or did you hear they're having this comedian there today, or that actress, or, you know, or something along them lines, then they're going to be drawn to that. Or like some people would say that they like food. So if you're saying, no, we're going to have Caribbean food that day, then they'll be like, oh, there's Caribbean food. What's going on in there? I'm going to go and check it out. So things like that, like just having different things that relates to culture. It could even be maybe a drumming session. So it could be that someone's coming in to teach drumming from either Africa or different part of the Caribbean or something like that. Or it could be that you're going to use different materials to make something, like different materials from, so some, like it depends on your budget as well. So it's like just really incorporating different like cultural days. So maybe you would attract a few people for that actual event, and then they would get to know about what is continuously going on. So hopefully that they will come back, because they'll be like, well, they might have met a few friends there. Also, you would have all engaged as well and interacted with each other. And also it's about doing icebreakers. So if it is that you are all sitting together and maybe there's one Black person sitting there, or there's two Black people sitting there, you can see who really sort of natters the most to each other. Sometimes it's doing little things, interactions, where you break those people away from each other and help make them do something that helps them to interact with someone else. And then it sort of then helps other people to get to know each other. But and also maybe bring a friend in today, because it's a day where you bring a friend in. The friend doesn't have to be breastfeeding, but then so they would look within their community and bring someone else, so they don't feel left out as well. And then within that day, you sort of do something, an activity that you mix friends. And then it's just helping other people, helping everyone liaise with different people that they wouldn't maybe normally would have. And then it just sort of helps to break the ice and just be like, oh, well, you know, that was a good experience. Maybe we'll come back again. And it's just, you know, just sort of really like it's going to take a lot of work, because as you said, it is majority, it is white, having imagery as well. And just sometimes even like, you find cultural pictures, it could be of anything. It doesn't need to only be just about breastfeeding. It could be about anything, and just having it that is not just predominantly white pictures, depending on your setting, if it's in a nursery or if it's in a cafe, I don't know. But then it's just like being in a actual environment that looks a bit more cultural or diverse can make someone feel more welcome as well. Yeah, and like, so sometimes, just to say one thing, sometimes there are times when some people do try to break the ice, and they'll be like, oh, you know, they will say something that is quite stereotypical, but sometimes it's just also thinking about your wording and what you're going to say as well makes a difference. We all have to generally think about how we talk to each other. So it's just sort of thinking first before you just let out some things. So I don't know if that helps.